So as we make our way through the Majestic-Class battleships, it's time to talk about the HMS Magnificent, which had a relatively rocky but eventful career. Construction on the HMS Magnificent began in December of 1893, December 18th, and it was launched almost a year later from the Chatham Dockyard on December 19th, 1894. She would then be commissioned into the Royal Navy almost a year after that, December 12th, 1895. When she was commissioned, she was initially put directly into the Channel Fleet to relieve the battleship the Empress of India, where she took the role as the second flagship of the Channel Fleet. She was in the Channel Fleet when she was brought to Spithead for the Diamond Jubilee naval review for Queen Victoria. There's another event involving Queen Victoria tied to the ship, however. When Queen Victoria died, when news of her death reached the crew of the ship, famously the ship, which was docked in Portsmouth, lowered the flag to half-mast, being a significant symbol of the Royal Navy mourning the death of the Queen. She would, like some of her sisters, be present at the Fleet Review for the coronation of King Edward when he ascended to the throne in 1902. Shortly after that, though, she was sent to the Aegean Sea, where she carried out maneuvers at the Mediterranean Fleet before stopping off in Gibraltar. In 1904, she was made the flagship of the Channel Fleet, a position which she held until that 1905 reorganization, which moved her to the Atlantic Fleet. On June 14, 1905, while serving with the Atlantic Fleet, she suffered a significant explosion on board centered around one of her 6-inch guns. The explosion, which was the result of a shell being improperly loaded into one of the breeches, resulted in 18 casualties and did significant damage to the vessel, needing significant repairs. Following these repairs, however, she wasn't returned to the Atlantic Fleet as she was starting to show her age and newer battleships were right around the corner. It was instead decided to use her as a gunnery ship, so she was brought out to train gunnery officers in shelling targets. To support this, she was actually brought back to the Chatham Dockyard in 1907 and given a fully upgraded fire control system to mimic the fire control systems on newer battleships like the Dreadnought. This would allow crews to use the Magnificent to train in operating those fire control systems. In late 1909, she very briefly became the flagship for the Vice Admiral of the Home Fleet before quickly being replaced by the battleship Bulwark, where she was then brought to Devonport to continue to serve as a training ship specifically for gunnery crews and stoking crews. On January 16, 1913, while sailing through the fog off Cawsand Bay, she ran aground, which did some minor damage to the vessel. She was repaired, however, and returned to the fleet by July 1st that same year. With World War I around the corner, as with many older warships, lots of British ships found themselves pressed into sort of emergency squadrons ahead of what they believed was an imminent conflict. This situation saw the Magnificent combined with the Hannibal, the Mars, and the Victorious, 4 other Majestic-Class battleships, into the 9th Battle Squadron, which was immediately dissolved when the war actually started, and the Majestic was instead moved to Humber to serve as a guard ship. By the end of August 1914, however, she was taken up to Scapa Flow, where she was used as a guard ship to guard the anchorage for the Grand Fleet, a role which she didn't hold for long, however, because she was relieved by the protected cruiser, the Crescent. She was then brought to Belfast for major overhauls, where all of her guns, except for 4 6-inch guns, were removed, and the ship was converted into a troop transport. Her main guns, by the way, were moved to Lord Clive-class monitors. By September 1915, the Dardanelles campaign was starting to kick off, and her and several other vessels, including a few modified Majestic-class battleships, were pressed into service as troop ships to carry troops down to the Dardanelles. So the Magnificent joined her sister ships, the Hannibal and the Mars, serving as troop ships, carrying troops from Britain down to the Dardanelles. While she was in the Dardanelles, she was involved in the evacuation of Suvla Bay following the failed invasion there, and after having successfully helped in evacuating Allied troops, she would be recalled back to the UK for more modifications. She would be taken to Belfast, where she'd be refit by Harland and Wolff to be converted into an ammunition ship, a role she would fill basically for the rest of the war. But with the end of the war, like many other Majestic-class battleships, the Magnificent was really starting to show her age, and the decision was made in 1920 to add her to the list for disposal, with her being purchased for scrap in 1921 and scrapped the same year, thus ending the story of the HMS Magnificent. If you'd like to learn about her sisters or the Majestic-Class as a whole, I'll leave a link up here to a playlist I've got all about the Majestic-Class, where you can learn about the stories of the ships in this class and what made this class so significant and unique. And if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Barbettes and Binnacles, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.